Gentlemen, happy Monday morning to you all. Take a deep breath and exhale. It was
let's podcast.
It was a lot going on this weekend at Lane Stadium, but I'll ask you guys, how was your overall game weekend experience at Lane?
Oh, it was good. It was a normal weekend, except for the closeness of the game against an FCS opponent. But other than that, it was fine. It was normal.
Did you drink some Stick-It-In ale this weekend?
I don't think I did.
Oh.
Yeah.
Blasphemy.
I was about to say, I'm sure Will did.
Yes, I had it Friday night and Saturday. And we had killer parking space. We had it lot 2 up
Actually,
against the grass.
I did. They
yeah,
had
you
it
were
at
there
the
Friday night.
tailgate. No, but I didn't drink on Friday night. Remember?
No.
Okay. I did at the tailgate on Saturday, though. They had some.
I was trying to perfectly tee up Stick-It-In ale, and then
Yeah.
Chris just,
No, but I forgot that I did have like 2 at the tailgate.
Okay, good.
Right,
good.
Yeah. No, it was good. The weather was not what I expected. Got a little bit of a sunburn. Got a little bit of that east stand sunburn.
Yep.
That's on this left side of your face. So this is not a problem on the podcast video because the camera's over there on my newly.
It's showing your good side.
That's right. Plus, I got a pretty decent tan in the face and arms because I drive around in the convertible all the time. So it's not. Man, I remember some of those September games just getting roasted and going back to work on Monday, and you're burned on one side of your face, and everybody's looking at you like, "What'd you do this weekend?" And the Hokie fans are like, "Went to the game, didn't you?" Yep.
Yeah, it started off kind of cloudy in the morning, and then it was sunny by kickoff. So
yeah, I was.
out.
We all had our rain gear. We were told there was a chance of rain, and man, by the end of the game, no, there was a chance of sunburn, is what there was.
We've got a lot to get to today on the Tech Sideline podcast. We will recap Virginia Tech's win over Furman, some of the players that stood out, some of the things that can be improved upon as Virginia Tech does enter their bye week this weekend, and we will do a little bit of big picture thinking towards the end of the podcast. A reminder that this week and every week, the TSL podcast is presented by the Fisher Law Firm, Virginia's trusted DOI and traffic defense firm dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. From their offices in Blacksburg and Roanoke, the Fisher Law Firm handles cases throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. To date, the firm has defended more than 30,000 people charged with moving violations. For a free consultation, call anytime, day or evening, toll free at 1-800-680-7031 or email them at info@fisherlegal.com. Before we jump into Tech football talk, though, we have a podcast set update. With that, here's Will Stewart.
Yes, so if you're watching the video for the first time, we have a 2-camera setup. We have a multi-camera setup. We got 2. We have a regular camera there in the middle, and then we have a camera on the side showing the handsome young guys, Evan and Chris. We do not have a camera on me yet. I imagine someday we will. I apologize for that, but at least that's in the future. So I will remind everybody that to some extent this is still amateur hour. We're still learning our way here, and we got some good feedback last week on the audio. I'll give an example of amateur hour. We got some good feedback on the audio. Someone was saying, when I listen to the podcast, you need to improve your mic discipline. So I go and do a little research on these mics that we use. They're Audio-Technica AT2020s. And I watch a review of them, and the first thing I realize is that we're not speaking into them correctly. We're speaking into the ends of them, and you are supposed to speak into the side of them. And 2 minutes into the review, the guy goes, "The back of the mic is labeled back. Don't talk into this part of the mic. Talk into the other." Oh, really? 78 podcasts in, and you're just now telling me there's a back on our microphones. So give us some feedback. Be nice. The comment that we got wasn't particularly nice. I can't believe you guys haven't fixed this yet. Whoa. Chill out. It's us, man. We're on your side. Give us some positive feedback. Say, listen, when I listen to it, this happens, that happens. You guys need to work on that. So we hope the audio is a little better. It was... We'll fess up. It was Evan's mic that was turned around backwards.
I apologize.
Fortunately, you have a voice that carries. So what else can I tell you? Oh, if you're watching the video today and you're seeing the pretty pictures on the television, that's because our Chromecast just decided to quit. We can't transmit a fun picture to it this week.
We had a great picture of Deshaun Crawford.
Oh, yeah, John Fleming got an awesome picture of Deshaun Crawford we're going to put up on the television. But when I went to Chromecast it to the television, the Chromecast isn't there.
And if you really want to see it, it's on the TSL homepage.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, go to TSL, or just imagine Deshaun Crawford being super excited after his first career sack.
He had a good game.
He did, and we will talk about him in just a little bit.
So anyway, that's a podcast update. So we're going 2 cameras for the first time, and we're continuing to work on the audio, and we just get a little bit better every week.
Will Stewart, he works around the clock, folks. He does everything to make this go. So
it's true.
Thank you for all you are doing, Will. Guys, let's go ahead and jump into it. Hokies pick up their second win of the year, 24-17, the final score. Chris, I'll start with you. It was a little bit of a roller coaster of a game. How do you sum up the win for Virginia Tech?
I think last week when you asked that question about ODU, I said bland. And, well, after this week, I would take bland all day long, because I was pretty ugly. I think Justin Fuentes said after the game on the radio, he was like, watching that crap makes you sick to your stomach. That's what he said on the radio to Mike Barnup after the game.
He wasn't specific about what he was referring to, so we think he meant the whole game.
We think he specifically meant the offense. And I wouldn't disagree with him there. I think the defense has shown improvements. Will and I both picked Furman to score 24 points, and on Friday I went around and looked at the predictions of a number of Virginia Tech writers, and a lot of them picked Furman to score 24 points. That seemed to be the consensus. Furman scored 17, and really two of those touchdowns. Both the touchdowns were off turnovers, very short fields. So the Tech defense played better than most analysts thought they would play this week.
Yeah, including us.
Including us.
I thought Furman would roll up, honestly, 300, 350 yards and some points. I thought they would possess the ball consistently.
Yeah, but I thought Tech was disciplined, more disciplined than they had been as far as not biting on fakes, playing your responsibilities instead of crashing down on those option plays, keeping containment, everything like that. I just think just a much better overall performance. Yeah, yes, it's Furman, but no matter who you're playing, your mental discipline as far as playing your assignments and things like that, it needs to be there. And it wasn't necessarily there all the time in the first 2 games, and they were much better as far as that goes against Furman on Saturday. So that was encouraging. What was not encouraging was the performance of the offense. We've seen the offense drop week by week in total yardage. And maybe now we understand why our highest yardage output was against Boston College. Because Boston College gave up 48 points and 300 and some rushing yards to Kansas on
Kansas
Friday
smoked
night.
BC 48-24.
Do you see it was their first road win against a Power 5 team since 2008?
Yeah, that game was in Chestnut Hill because that's the first thing in your brain. It's not like playing at Kansas as a pit, but your first thought was, did Boston College go to Kansas? No, Kansas went into Chestnut Hill the same way Virginia Tech went into Chestnut Hill, and the result was very different.
Yeah, so you don't believe in the transitive property in football at all. I don't. It's not that Boston College lost to Kansas. It's not that Boston College beat Virginia Tech, but it's what Kansas did in that game and what Virginia Tech didn't do in that game. When Virginia Tech got smashed up front and couldn't run the football, Kansas averaged 7.7 yards per carry, something like that, and rushed for well over 300 yards. At one point in that game, they had a little over 300 yards rushing, and they had averaged over 9 yards a carry. Their average dropped a little bit in the fourth quarter.
They were sitting on the lead.
Yeah, BC was just selling out to stop the run. They knew Kansas was going to run it. So you see, it takes Virginia Tech a half to really get the running game going against Furman, a team that gave up 48 points the week before against Georgia State, who, by the way, lost to Western Michigan 57-10 this past week.
Who beat Tennessee?
Right. So it's just, Tennessee's bad. I would probably pick Tech to beat Tennessee, maybe. But anyway, it's just like, so what's wrong here?
Yeah, the evidence is starting to accumulate. Yeah. This is 3 games now.
It's 3 games now. Some of it is youth. Now all right, in the second half, or at one point in it was in the second quarter when Janzi got benched, I guess. Yeah, it was
very late second
quarter, yeah. At that point, Virginia Tech had a true freshman at center, a true freshman at right guard, a redshirt freshman at right tackle, a true freshman at tailback, a true freshman starting at slot, and a redshirt freshman starting at outside receiver. So that's over 50% of the starting offense is freshmen.
Yeah.
Which is Tech is only going to be but so good. But they just seem to be getting worse, and that's the problem. Why has Silas Janzi regressed since his redshirt freshman year? If you recall, he was a starting right tackle in the UVA game at the end of last season when Tech ran for 250 yards. I mean, Tech bludgeoned a pretty darn good UVA defense at the end of last year on the ground, ran all over him. Janzi was the starting right tackle for that game. So he goes from being able to block a good UVA defense to not being able to block Old Dominion and Furman.
Yeah, and
so
you know,
what's the issue there?
And let's not beat him up vaguely. Let's be specific. He had a couple of false start penalties, gave up a couple of sacks, and was on the side where a third sack was given up. So when I talk about him giving up 2 sacks, if I'm remembering my game film correctly, this is one-on-one. He was beaten one-on-one by a defensive end. And then the third sack that was given up was a blitzer from his side. You never know exactly what people's reads and responsibilities are in those situations. So,
well, they took him out after that third one.
Actually,
right?
I think that was the second one. The third one was one-on-one. He just got beat, and that's when they pulled him. The second one may or may not be, quote unquote his fault, but Chris looked up his grade on Pro Football Focus.
What was that?
I forget the exact grade, but it was by far the worst on the team.
It was I think you said 36.
So that sounds about right.
And it's
but by comparison, Luke Tenuta, his replacement, was a 71.
And Luke played a lot of snaps. He played a full half.
So that's the second week in a row they've pulled Janzi for Tenuta, and Tenuta has come in and graded out 70 plus.
Yeah. So something's not right with Silas Janzi, and it's hard to say what. Is he hurt? We don't know. Does he have something personal going on? What's the story? We don't know. All we can do is appraise his performance, and it hasn't been good.
Well, let me ask you this. Going back to the game, down 14-3 at halftime, what did not go right for Virginia Tech in that first half?
So in reviewing the film, the defense was playing well. Furman had minus 5 yards on their first possession and like 3 yards on their second possession or something like that. No first downs. Then Trey Turner fumbles and Furman scores. They get a couple first downs and score a touchdown. And then was it the next possession that Willis threw the interception?
If it wasn't the next possession, it was
the
the
one
possession
after
after
that.
that.
The one he overthrew the receiver?
Yeah.
The game was going – it wasn't going great offensively. Tech didn't roll to a touchdown on their first possession. They had 2 false starts, one of which they recovered from, and the second one they didn't recover from it. So they had to kick a field goal. So it wasn't going great for the offense, but the defense was playing well. And then the turnover. And I also, one of the things I looked for when I watched the game film last night, I thought in the stands that it was just dead, that there was no enthusiasm from anywhere. All right. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Sure.
In watching the game film, there was enthusiasm on the part of the defense early in the game. They had a couple plays in the backfield, and guys were, slapping people on helmets, and it was old school, everybody mobbing the guy who made the tackle. Then the turnover happened, the touchdown happened, and the air went out of Lane Stadium. Not that there was a lot in it at that point, but it got really quiet and really flat. And then they came out in the second half, and they got help me out with the sequence here. Tech got a turnover, I think, or a couple big plays on offense.
So Furman punted.
Tech had the ball, and that's when
Furman punted. Then Keshawn King broke off the back-to-back runs, and then Furman turned it over.
Right, and these things, and I was paying a lot of attention to just the energy in the stadium, and it went way up. So I got to thinking about this stuff, and here's Captain Obvious reporting for duty. Fans. One of the things that there's, I don't think the fans and the team are as engaged as we've seen them in the past. And one of the reasons they are not is, to get fans fired up, you need playmakers. And Virginia Tech used to get a lot of plays from the defense. They would get sacks and TFLs and turnovers, and they would get a lot of plays from special teams as well. They would block a punt or they'd have a punt return. None of that stuff is happening anymore in compared to the way it used to. There used to be a lot of that stuff going on. So it just becomes this thing where you're giving up some yards, maybe the other team's punting, you're trying to get some offense going and you don't, and you got to punt, and Back and forth you go, and there's just no energy. Well, early in the second half, they had a couple of long runs, a couple of exceptional runs from Keshawn King. They had a turnover, and they scored off of it. And then I think there was another turnover. It just, the energy went up. And that's been one of the things that's been missing. So, if you asked a question about kind of like what happened, and Tech was doing okay until they started turning it over themselves, and that's when the energy went out. And then when they made some plays and made things happen in the second half, if you just look at the second half was 21-3, right?
Yeah.
You do that for a whole game, it's 42-6. Everybody's satisfied.
Everybody's happy, right?
Well,
the energy came back in the stadium when Keshawn King started breaking some tackles on that 15-yard run, right? And everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, a Tech running back breaking some tackles! Imagine that!"
Yeah.
So I think it's easier. Well, let me rephrase that. I think the crowd loses its fire a lot easier these days than it used to. You need to get the crowd involved early. If you don't, they're just gonna be flat the rest of the game. I mean, that's not old school Wayne Stadium in there even anymore. Even when Tech is good on a regular game, I don't feel like it's quite what it used to be.
It's really
why.
not.
Well, I mean, at the ODU game last week, there were two girls sitting about 5 rows in front of me and to my right, and they spent 5 to 10 minutes of the first quarter finding the perfect selfie angle with the field behind them instead of actually watching the game. So, I mean, that's what people do these days at games. A lot of them, especially the younger crowd, the student crowd, it's more about the social experience than the actual game.
It's the oddest thing to go on a tangent, okay? Went to Myrtle Beach in August, sitting out on the beach and watched 3 or 4 teenage girls spend half an hour to an hour taking pictures on their cell phones to post on Instagram later. Posing. It's this. I can't, and I don't know. I don't want to criticize because that's just how it is. But I don't get it.
It's not whether that I get it or don't get it. I don't really care. But if you're looking for an answer as to why Lane isn't as loud as it used to be, well, part of it's because the team's not as good and there's not as much to cheer about. But also part of it is that. The students are
the
there.
focus on self versus the focus on being part of something larger.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I mean, you look at the student section at halftime; it was empty. The second half. I'll be honest. My freshman year, I was sitting in the student section, and a couple of my buddies were like, "Hey, it was the North Carolina game where Tech absolutely demolished North Carolina. Let's go." Well, why not stay for the whole game? That's not the students don't want to stay for a full game anymore, except your Clemson and your Notre Dame. That's the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
Well, it's harder to keep people's attention these days, and I think really things need to be moving at a fast pace to keep people's attention. And all these timeouts in football these days.
2 minutes and 35 seconds.
2 minutes and 35.
Now we know how long they are.
Now we know how long they are.
And they are.
There's just so many of them, and I just think that hurts the viewing experience. The live viewing experience from the stadium, all those timeouts and stuff. I mean, I understand that you have to do that to get all that TV money that comes in because that's what pays for everything these days. But I do think it hurts the live viewing experience in this day and age with how society has moved. I just think football is a very slow sport. It's hard to keep people's attention for 3.5 hours with so many stoppages. In my opinion.
And it's not any one thing. I know people are sitting here listening to us or watching us, and they're like, "Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that." It's a combination of things that, and there's a phrase that I can't. It's death by 1,000 tiny cuts.
Yeah.
Nothing killed the energy all at once. It was all just an accumulation of things. And one of the things that, and I'm sure I've talked about this on the podcast before. I know I've written about it. When Tech played Tennessee in the 2009 Chick-fil-A Bowl. I had a VHS tape of the 1994 Gator Bowl when Tech played Tennessee, and I went back and watched that to just kind of refresh my memory to feed a column I was writing. 1994, the commercial breaks were a minute long. 2 commercials, boom, boom, you're right back at it. Not as many games were televised back then. So you would go to a game and stuff would, first of all, there's no video board, nothing to distract you from what's going on the field, no cell phones. You'd get wrapped up in the action. If there were breaks, they were short. And so the energy level could get up in the stadium and stay up, particularly when you're sacking the quarterback and blocking punts and things like that. It just built on itself. And now, so that game the other day was actually short. It was about exactly 3 hours.
That was a really short football game, I guess, because Furman ran the ball so much.
Yeah. So, but now there are things to take your attention away and slow down the pace that come at you all game long. So there is not a solution. Everybody talks about this stuff, and we've gotten way off topic here. So
And that's but this was a good conversation because there were fans leaving early from the game, and
so part of what's going on with the students is they sit in the metal bleachers in the north end zone and they fry. It gets hot down there. From what I understand, and Malcolm can feed into this or not, I don't. If there's water for sale down there, it's $4 a bottle. There is no refilling station down there for water bottles. I was in the east stands, the middle of the east stands, not the northeast end, but there's a water bottle refilling station, and the line is like 40 people long.
I walked right by it, and it was huge.
And I turned to the guy next to me and I said, I watched this line. I was standing in a concession line last year, and I watched this line. These kids stand in that line for 20 minutes. They miss half a quarter to a quarter if they come down here to refill their water bottle. Mm-hmm. It's Malcolm kind of, if you're listening on the podcast, we don't have Malcolm tied into the audio, so we'll repeat what he says.
I'm here.
Oh, he's in. Okay,
yes,
so he's
cool.
in. So is that accurate? Do they have water for sale underneath the north stands? Do they have refilling stations? What's the deal down there?
There's nothing under the north stands except people in neon vests that tell you need to leave because you can't walk straight. So, if we're being honest, a lot of these kids show up and they've been on Center Street and they're drinking. So
they're dehydrated.
You show up already dehydrated and you sit out in direct sunlight for 3.5, maybe 4 hours.
Sure.
You just want to go home after a while.
Yeah.
Especially with Furman.
Especially when it's 14-3 Furman
after the
halftime.
first half, when an FCS team is smacking you around and you're dehydrated and you can't think straight, you just want to leave.
Yeah, I forget which game it was at last year, but I was in a concession stand line, and I bought a girl a water because she didn't have any money. She was parched. She was so dehydrated. She shouldn't have still been in the stadium, honestly. So yeah, I don't blame them for leaving.
I'm pretty sure the administration knows this too. This is feedback they've gotten.
Right.
So
interesting. Again, we'll tie it back.
A huge tangent, but
listen, I do want to quickly talk about this, and then it's like after halftime things. We'll talk about the positives from this game. But Will and I were talking before the podcast began about Tech and turnovers, and that has been a common theme in the first 3 games. And Will, I know you have the numbers in front of you right now, but Virginia Tech turnover-wise, through 3 games, has the worst margin of any FBS team. And I know
any
Will
Power 5 team.
I'm sorry, correct. Power 5. My apologies.
Yeah. So let's see. Let me find it. I've got it written here somewhere. Let me flip my page over.
I believe they're the 3rd worst in FBS.
Yeah. So out of 130 ranked teams, Virginia Tech is number 127 in turnovers lost. All right. Number 124 in turnover margin. Number 79 in turnovers gained. So, I think Furman turned it over twice, right?
Yeah.
And those were the 2nd and 3rd turnovers that Tech's gotten all year. They'd only gotten 1 before that. So that's the deal there at the very bottom in terms of turnovers lost and turnover margin.
The 3 teams ahead of Virginia Tech was New Mexico State, Hawaii, and Georgia.
South Alabama. Actually behind Tech. So number 128, 129, and 130 are those 3 teams.
So, Chris, when you hear that and you look at the turnovers, obviously it's been addressed, and obviously Justin Fuente is key in on that. Why is it this team is turning the football over, in your opinion?
I mean, Willis just played horribly against Boston College. I mean, that was all him. What were the other turnovers? A muff punt.
Yes.
Another Willis interception this past Saturday, and was there a Willis fumble? Who was the fumble? Oh, Trey Turner.
It was Trey
Turner.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think there's one reason for it. Guys are just turning it over. I mean, I remember after the 2016 season, Virginia Tech had 9 turnovers after the first 2 games, right?
Right, and they were all fumbles.
And they were all fumbles. And they didn't have as much of a problem the rest of the season with turnovers. I think
they got clamped down on quickly.
Yeah, I think they can be random to a certain extent. Like, I mean, Tech could come out against Duke and not turn it over at all. I do think there's some randomness to it. But I don't think there's not one reason Tech is turning it over. I think for the most part, it's half those turnovers are because Willis had an awful game against Boston College. But I mean, there's nothing you can put your finger on. I mean, it's a muff punt, it's an interception, it's a wide receiver fumbling, it's a quarterback fumbling, it's a running back fumbling. I mean, it's not like there's one position group that you can identify as the culprit. I mean, it's everybody collectively.
And talking about is like talking about free throw shooting,
right?
You know, when the team goes out and shoots 65% from the line in a game, and fans say, "Don't they practice free throw shooting? It's important." Well,
right.
Duh,
and yes, Virginia Tech football practices ball security. I mean, we watched them do it. Yeah,
We've seen them do it.
I mean, that doesn't mean they're gonna.
This game though, that the turnover from Turner led to the first Furman touchdown. They got some momentum off that turnover, but they did clean that up in the second half. And Willis
and reversed it actually, which was the key.
Yep, and you take out the interception from Willis, statistically one of his better games of the year, 17
from a percentage standpoint, but it makes no sense that Tech couldn't hit anything down the field against Furman after Georgia State lit them up.
Well, Bud said after the game that's the way Furman defended them. They gave him the underneath stuff.
I mean, as they should, but still, you would think you would be able to break. Well, I don't necessarily mean a 40-yard pass downfield, but hit something to Tavion Robinson and there's green grass in front of him or something. You know. It just wasn't there.
So let's transition to the second half, where, as Will said, Virginia Tech outscores Furman 21-3. The offense gets going a little bit. Virginia Tech gets its second consecutive win of the season. Let's start with the running, and we've talked about him. Like Sean King, 12 carries, 119 yards, the long of 54, a couple of great cutbacks in the open field. He really got the ball rolling, so to speak, and the momentum back on Tech's side. We knew Tech had to run the football better against Furman, and they did it. And Keshawn King, he had that breakout game.
Yeah, and always to put up big rushing numbers, you know, it's not like you're going to go out there and carry the ball 5 or 6 yards every time, every handoff, right? I mean, there's going to be 1-2 yard gains in there, but to have a really productive day rushing, you've got to break off a couple of big runs. Like Kansas against Boston College, they averaged 7.6 or 7 yards per carry, but it's not like they carried it 7 to 8 yards every single play. There was an 82-yarder in there. There was a 50-some yarder in there. You know, so you have to have big plays in the running game to have a productive running game. And Tech finally got a big play in the running game from Keshawn King. Broke some tackles on that 15-yard run, and then made some really good
3
cuts.
tackles on that 15-yard run.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's probably still 18 years old.
Sure. He's got braces. He's a kid.
He's not as big and physical as he's going to get.
Right, exactly. So, you know, it was a good sign to see a Tech running back do that. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know, man. I don't think that running game's going to be good this year. I think he's Tech's best running back, but when you look, he's a true freshman, and what you're looking at up front is a true freshman center, Brian Hudson, who they plan to redshirt.
Yeah.
And now they plan to redshirt as an offensive tackle, and now he's a starting center. I mean, he's their 4th option at center. That's what they're down to. And Nestor's a right guard as a true freshman. And now one of your more experienced offensive linemen is a redshirt sophomore, and all of a sudden he can't play. So you've got a redshirt freshman at right tackle. So 3 freshmen blocking for a freshman. That's not going to work.
So and one of the areas where you see that manifesting itself is in pass protection. And the inability to pick up what looks to my untrained eye like just simple blitzes.
Late blitz. Hudson missed that late blitz in the second half.
Yeah.
And it was just too late to get over to the left of the guy.
And some of it, I did remember seeing one where they ran a stunt. They flipped 2 guys, and the Tech offensive lineman got intent on trying to pick that up, and then here comes the corner blitzer or linebacker blitzing untouched. These guys are young, and they haven't played together, and they'll get better at it, but so back to the Keshawn King thing, you know, everybody talks about the 15-yard run or the 54-yard run or whatever distances they were. But I've noticed a couple of plays that I'll highlight in today's article that this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. I don't want to invoke the name Ryan Williams because that is, you know, those guys don't grow on trees. But what Ryan Williams was really good at was taking a play where there was nothing and getting 3 to 5 yards out of it. And I actually saw that from Keshawn King a couple of times. One of them, he bounced into the line, came reversed back. I think it was in the right side of the line. He reversed back and came through the left side of the line.
Did the same thing against BC from right to left.
So watching it live, I'm going, oh, he's cutting back. He might get 1 or 2 yards out of this. And he's got the vision, and he kind of squirts 5 yards forward. And the next thing you know, a total nothing play is a 5-yard gain. And that, to me, is way more valuable than, yes, the long runs are nice and important, but being able to take what was going to be a 2nd and 10 and turn it into a 2nd and 5, that's extremely valuable. And that's the kind of thing Virginia Tech's been missing for literally years. They've had some decent backs, but not guys that can make something out of nothing consistently.
Yeah, no doubt. And he's still got a ways to go. You see him running into blockers sometimes and things like that.
And he missed one hole he
did. And,
Saturday,
there was always the caveat that it's Furman's defense, and they can't stop anybody. But at the same time, I do think it's pretty clear that he's Tech's best back. I thought he would be.
And I wasn't feeling that before this game, but I definitely saw it in this game.
He's a guy that he's got to get into the open field to show what he's able to do, and he hasn't gotten into the open field at all the first 2 games. But you see what he can do now when he gets into the open field. The issue is getting him into the open field.
You look at the numbers between him and Sean McLeese. They both had about the same amount of carries. King had 12 carries. McLeese had 10. But McLeese, 24 yards, averaged 2.4 yards per carry. King, 119. He averaged 9.9 yards per carry.
And I don't recall McLeese breaking a single tackle.
What was his longest run?
McLease's longest run was 4 yards.
4 yards, right.
So that tells you.
I mean, it's the 3rd game of the season. Honestly, McLease is probably hurt. And I don't.
Come on, be nice.
I'm not saying that to be negative. We've run the numbers before.
And his production declines.
He's always the best in the first game and the last game, and in the middle, his production goes down.
Right.
And I've always assumed it's because he's a smallish guy and he gets banged up and he's not as healthy.
So back to Keshawn King, 12 carries, and he was beat up. Man, he only carried the ball 12 times.
Yeah.
So the word is thigh bruise. So
so a good week to have a bye week.
Yeah,
that's the
for
rumor.
a lot
of
reasons.
Coaches didn't say that. That's just the rumor.
Okay, gotcha.
So
he was smiling after the game though. There's a picture of him. Yeah.
Trey Turner, 5 attempts, 68 yards, a touchdown along of 29, of course. Let's talk about how he was able to bounce back. I always like the word resiliency, and Coach Fuente talked about in the press conference afterwards when he went up to him at halftime and basically said something along the lines of, "I've had way more interceptions in my career as a quarterback than you have fumbling."
Which is true, by the way. We looked up Fuente's stats, and they were not. What was it? 10 touchdowns and 18 interceptions. Was
that what it was?
Something like that.
Well, he was playing for John Blake.
Yeah. So there's a caveat there.
Listen, Trey Turner after fumbling, and Fuente saying that he was, I think the word he used was inconsolable. I mean, he was so upset about fumbling.
He didn't look good walking off the field. It seemed like he wanted to take as much time before he got to the sideline as possible.
Don't take it so hard, guys. Come on, man. So I saw somebody say, and I think it was one of the guys halftime of the ACC network said they got to talking about the turnovers, and I thought his comment was very fair. He said, I think the term is tunnel screen. He said those tunnel screens, that's tough. You catch the ball and you immediately got to figure out where all the defenders are. Mm-hmm. He said so. That's he didn't use the phrase excusable turnover, but that's not an easy play. And Trey, it's not like Trey is 6'4", 230. He's a guy that I would imagine. I know I'd get a little skittish running across the middle like that. So he should not be inconsolable, man. Relax. It's a mistake, okay?
Trey Turner is 6'2", 190.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but he was really a spark in the second half. And we talked about last week on the podcast how Turner had not seen as much production as I think that some fans were hoping to see. Mm-hmm. It was good, I'm sure, to see Turner get as many touches, get the ball as much as he did against Furman.
I would agree with that. The way I see it, Tech's best playmakers are Trey,
Keshawn,
Tavion Robinson, and probably James Mitchell. Those would be the 4 guys you'd want to throw the ball to, most likely that a big play is happening. That's 2 true freshmen and 2 true sophomores. But, I mean, Virginia Tech's offense should be based around those 4 guys touching the ball as often as possible.
And, part of – if there's been a lack of production on Trey's part of that, they've been throwing the ball to Tavion Robinson so much up until this game.
And we need to get Damon Hazelton back, too.
Yep.
We've all been very complimentary of Caleb Smith, and he's deserved it. He's a redshirt freshman. But my gosh, this is another freshman starting on offense for Virginia Tech because another upperclassman is hurt.
Yeah.
I don't want to go through the whole season. Caleb Smith should be catching 15 to 20 passes in a backup role right now at this point in his career. He got that scholarship. He deserved the scholarship. He's a solid player, but he doesn't need to be starting right now. You need to get Damon Hazleton back, a guy who caught 55 or 60 passes last year. I mean, that would be – let's not discount the absence of Hazleton here.
Right.
Yep. Sure. And, of course, he's roommates with Willis, and the two of them are close, and there's a chemistry between the two of them. Caleb Smith, you go back and watch that 54-yard run, by the way, it was Caleb Smith. I don't know if you guys saw sprinting down the field.
I put that in my article yesterday. That was a great effort on that play.
Yep.
For sure.
So for Hazleton's sake, though, as Fuente said, there's been some practices he's looked really good, and then there's been some he's looked hurt. I'm sure, again, the bye week, many of reasons, but for him, you would hope that he's ready to go next Friday against Duke, correct?
Yeah, and I would have held him out of this game no matter what because I don't want him to re-injure, which they did. You know the saying that football coaches use, if you can't practice, you can't play, because guys will say they're hurt to get out of practice and things like that, and then you tell them, okay, 6 a.m. in the training room, and by the way, if you can't practice this week, then you can't play on Saturday. And amazing when you tell football players that, they all of a sudden get healthy, right? So why is it not the other way around? All right, if you can't play, you shouldn't be able to practice, right? So if he's not healthy enough to play, I don't know how much practicing he's doing. But if he's not healthy enough to play, why? And they practiced him the day after the BC game that he didn't. And that was when Fuente said, he looked really good today.
Said you're going to have a good week.
Right. And you're going to play next week. And then the Tuesday practice, he didn't look as good. Why are they, if it's like that, like, why are you practicing him? If he hasn't been able to play, how has he been able to practice, right?
Yeah.
Now, I say that not knowing exactly how much he's practicing, define practice for him, right? I don't know. But I want that guy healthy, man. ACC schedule starting up now. You got Duke coming in, and you need all your guys as healthy as possible. And I'm not a trainer, and I don't understand hamstring injuries or anything like that. But it does sound like he's been working in practice some, but been unable to play on Saturdays.
But it's hard to say.
It's hard to say.
Let's do this. Let's take a timeout here on the Tech Sideline podcast, which is presented each and every week by the Fisher Law Firm. We'll come back. We'll talk about the defense, and then we'll do some general overview questions. We'll get to your questions on Facebook, and then we'll call it a podcast. Again, you're listening to the Tech Sideline podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. Okay.
Everything going all right over there?
Oh, great.
All right. Well, you're still recording the video, though, right? All right. All right.
Right? 3, 2, 1. Welcome back aboard the Tech Sideline podcast, recording on Monday morning. Today is September the 16th. So glad everybody could join us, whether you're watching or listening. We're recapping Virginia Tech's 24-17 win over Furman. We've got Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes, Will Stewart on set with Chris Coleman, and I'm Evan Hughes. Guys, let's transition. We talked about the offense. Let's talk about the defense, because there were some guys that really stepped up, made some names for themselves in this game. I want to look at the box score, though. Dax Hollifield had a rebound game from Old Dominion. He led the team in tackles with 10. 8 of them were assists, however, 2 were solo. Chamari Connor, 7 solo tackles, 8 total, second on the team. And then guys like Eli Adams had 7 tackles. And we saw Deshaun Crawford get his first sack of his Tech career. Will, it felt like some guys stepped up that we hadn't talked about, and it was good to see the progression of some of those guys.
With the caveat that it's Furman. But then again, Furman's supposed to have a good offense. So the guys that stood out to me were Crawford. He had a really good game. Just being disruptive. Never mind the stats. I noticed him a lot. Number 36 was very active. I texted Chris, and I missed who started at defensive end at the beginning of the game, and he said Eli Adams started.
Adams had a good game too.
Yeah, and so he must be a better matchup for Furman. I don't think that means that Adams is going to be the starter from here on out. That may have just been a matchup.
Hopefully Garbutt's back soon, and then he's the starter.
Chamari Connor is a guy that we're high on here at Tech Sideline. He's got the size. and he got uncorked. Bud got him some plays in space and sent him in, and I think that looks promising. Let's see who else. Dax, Dax played better. He still took a couple wrong angles here and there, and he did miss. He did have one tackle in the hole that he flat missed.
He's actually listed with 3 missed tackles on Pro Football Focus for yesterday.
Yeah.
He has a really high run defense grade, as in he was there. He got in the right spot, but then he missed. His tackling grade was very poor. Yeah. He was still, I think, the 3rd highest rated defender for Tech.
He did have a forced fumble as well, I should add.
Right.
And, the fact that so part of me wants to say 10 tackles, but 8 of them were assists indicates to you that he's showing up at the spot while other people have gotten there first. You like your backer, and I actually want to do this analysis, go back and look at backers and Mikes of the past and what percentage of their tackles are assisted versus unassisted before I kind of go down that path and say things maybe I shouldn't say. But that said, the fumble was forced because Dax showed up after Chamari Connor, I think, had already made the initial hit. It was Dax that made that play happen. And that's what we want out of the Tech defense anyway. I would actually I've looked at a lot of box scores over the years, and I looked at one box score. I don't remember what year it was. It was a road game, so the road crew's keeping the stats. Virginia Tech's not keeping the stats. And whoever it was handing out tackling assists like candy. I totaled up the number of unassisted tackles and assisted tackles, and it was
what year was this?
I don't remember what year it was. Was it Boston College? What do you think?
I don't know. I remember my old roommate, Vince Hall, used to thank him for the number. My old roommate used to be the guy who would keep stats for Tech, and Vince Hall used to thank him for giving him so many tackles.
It's like all Oprah. You get a tackle. You get a tackle. You get a tackle. Yeah. So, but it's what you want to see out of your defense is you want to see more than one guy showing up.
Well, what's interesting is comparing the Pro Football Focus tackles to the Hokie Sports tackles. Mm-hmm. Now, the Hokie Sports tackles, they're kept real time.
Yeah.
By probably either a lowly paid employee or an intern who's doing the box score on live stats and everything like that, and then they go into the box score. Pro Football Focus, they watch the film, so they're able to get a clearer view.
They can back up.
Right. So they've got Dax with 5 tackles and Chamari with 10.
Dax with 5 tackles total.
I think it was 5 solo and 1 assist, maybe. I don't remember. I don't have it right in front of me. Yeah. But Chamari, they had him with 10 tackles. So they had Chamari with more than Virginia Tech credited him for, and Dax with fewer than Virginia Tech credited him for.
And you see some humorous things if you look through a lot of play-by-play and box score like I do. Like what game was it? The ODU game where Caleb Stewart got a carry and they gave it to Chase Matheny. Chase also wears number 30. And what did they gave somebody a punt return? Like they gave Deshaun Crawford a punt return. Hezekiah Grimsley's back there wearing number 6, and somehow that got turned into number 36. So you see this stuff, and it generally gets corrected later.
Right.
I think back when Frank and his guys used to sit and review film on Sunday morning, I think they would send the corrected stats to Dave Smith's team. Mm-hmm. So you would see the stats right after the game, and then you'd see, and I'm talking about tackling specifically, you'd see the tackling stats right after the game, and then you see the tackling stats after the
because
coaching staff
what came up on beamerball.com with post-game interviews the day after were always a little bit different than you saw on Hokie Sports.
Yeah, because the coaches had done the review and counted them up themselves.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So, again, some guys took some steps forward this week. Chamari Connor had a solid game for Tech. It was good to see Eli Adams step up. And it's interesting, Pro Football Focus, how they can vary a little bit. So let's do this. Let's throw it over to Malcolm. Yes, he's related to Stewart. Let's take a look and see if we have any questions at this point, any comments. And then we'll get into some big picture thoughts and get ready to wrap things up here.
There's a lot about Ryan Willis. Should he be benched? Should he and Hooker start switching out? Somebody referenced when Sean Glennon and Tyrod Taylor did that, and it worked out. And,
it's a good question. In 2007, for all the flack Steiny got, he managed that quarterback situation in 2007 brilliantly. The rotation. You could not possibly be managed any better than Brian Steinspring managed.
I remember there are games where, like didn't Tyrod play almost the entire game against Duke that year?
Well, Tyrod was the starter early in the year. Remember, they benched Glennon, and then Tyrod was a full-time starter. Tyrod got hurt against Duke. They brought Glennon back.
Was that really cold game?
No, it was early. This was early in the
okay.
season. This was September at Duke. The
Okay.
cold game was the next year when it was so awful.
For a reason.
Yeah, but they did have a quarterback rotation for the second half of that year, basically, and they'd bring in Tyrod, and yes, they'd run read option and stuff like that, but they also let him throw it enough to where it kept defenses on their toes. So just really, really well done by that staff. What makes it really difficult these days is obviously the Virginia Tech offense would look a lot different with Hendon Hooker in there. It would help the running game. It would probably we think it would probably hurt the passing game. We think, but how much would the improvement in the running game help offset the improvement or the regression in the passing game? So which would come out ahead there? You have to balance that out in your head. I think the coaches are thinking, okay, Willis is a better passer. Our strength is at wide receiver, so we start the better passer.
So
right?
if you're 3 years down the road and all these young offensive linemen are still in the program and developing, and you're suddenly a better run blocking team, and Keshawn King is 200 pounds instead of 185, maybe your thinking changes.
Right, maybe that's possible. And also another thing these days is, teams that they just don't go full contact in practice as much as they used to, and even when they do, they put the yellow jersey on their quarterback, or it was yellow jersey when Frank was here. I don't think it's yellow jersey anymore.
I think it's orange.
I think it's orange.
These
yeah.
guys do orange.
So quarterbacks don't do contact scrimmage work. You can't really know what Hendon Hooker is going to bring to your offense unless he goes full, unless you allow him to be tackled to the ground instead of blowing a whistle when anybody gets within 2 yards of him. You can't truly tell what he would bring to your offense in a practice situation. And that's why I'm really disappointed that Virginia Tech struggled to put away Old Dominion and Furman, because you don't want to. I don't know. Putting the Hooker in there could help. It could also hurt. You don't want to take that chance against Duke, right? You want to have some evidence beforehand, and now that because they struggled against those two teams, you don't have any evidence either way. So I don't know. To me it's a coin flip. I don't know what it would do.
And this is something that builds on itself. And what it makes me think of is back before there were 99 bowl games, not every team went to a bowl. And if you went to a bowl, that meant you got something like 15 extra practices. Right. And so teams would go to bowls year after year, and they would just get better and better and have more and more practice than teams that weren't going to bowls. Mm-hmm. And it built on itself. And the inability to blow teams out and get meaningful film on your backups is also something that builds on itself in a negative way. You just can't get enough film and really see how you guys are doing.
Yeah, that's a great question. Anything else over there, Malcolm? Yes, he's related, Stuart.
Yeah, we just got a question from Billy Lester. Do you think the young team has more potential to improve versus last year, given better chemistry and unity?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think their chemistry's fine and all that. The thing is, I'd have to go and run the numbers. I think they're probably even younger this year because of who they're playing up front on the offensive line. I'd like to get Hoyt back at center. Ideally, you'd like to have Janzi playing well so you can have options. Like, okay, maybe you could move him to right guard and start Tenuta at right tackle, which is I think what they wanted to do at one point during the preseason. I was going
to ask you, do you think Janzi's built? He's 6'5", but do you think he's built more like a guard?
I don't know. I think he's one of those guys that could play either one. I always viewed him as a pure tackle until this year.
Yeah.
But I think
now when Tenuta comes in, Tenuta
looks
like
definitely a tackle. Yeah.
But anyway, I got
yes. So he's having trouble with that edge rush. So maybe guard is a better fit for him. We'll see. I know it's not fair to Brian Hudson that he's playing this year when he should be redshirting, and we really need to make a bowl game to make that worthwhile. Because if you look back at the end of the season and say we blew Brian Hudson's red shirt, and we didn't even make a bowl, right. What was the point of that? We should have just started John Harris and preserved his red shirt, right?
But anyway, back to the question. One of the, are they going to gel? Are they going to get better as the season goes along? Well, you hope so. It's hard to say. One of the things that I worry about is all the playing time taking its toll on Sean King and him not being as good at the end of the year as he is now. Hard to say, man. It's an excellent question.
We're missing 4 starters on offense right now.
Yeah.
Missing Damon Hazelton, the number 1 receiver. Missing the starting center, the starting right guard for BC, although I don't know if he would have held on to that job or not, but TJ Jackson.
TJ Jackson.
And then Janzi is just absent.
Oh, and you're missing Holston.
And Holston,
Yeah.
you're right. So you're missing a whole bunch of starters or starting caliber players. Holston's not coming back.
Right.
Those other guys we think will be back.
You mean not coming back for an extended period of time, or you think it could be a season?
If he had surgery on his leg, I wouldn't think he'd be back at any point.
Well, the reason I ask is because there's no official word.
Maybe for the of course.
Yeah,
but,
there's no official word.
There's no official word, but I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, even if it was one of those minor surgeries where he'd be healed in 6 weeks, then you've still got to rehab and get back into game shape and all that stuff. I'm not anticipating him being a factor at any point this year.
Yeah.
So it's just so many key guys are out right now. So yes, they can get better. If they get these guys, if they get Hazelton back, I'll feel better about it. If they get Hoyt, I mean, I think Hoyt is not a great player, but he's better. He's a better option than true freshman Brian Hudson, who's never played until last week. It's center.
Yeah.
So I do think they can get better. Yes, if they get some of these injured players back, and their young guys show some improvement and things like that. There's obviously it's a lot of work to do, but I do think the chemistry's fine. I don't think there's anything. I don't think the chemistry is an issue. I don't think it was as big an issue as people made it out to be last year. If chemistry was an issue last year, then they wouldn't have shown all that grit down the stretch to come back from a 4-6 record to qualify for a bowl game, right? Teams that have packed it in don't do that.
Yeah, to draw a parallel, the Dolphins, who have pretty much quit, played well for one half against the Patriots yesterday. They were down something like
it was 16-0.
16-0 at the half, and then they just gave up.
Right.
In the second half, it got smoked like 43-0.
Right.
And we didn't see that kind of behavior out of Tech. Well, not late in the season.
Right.
That was a great question. Awesome. Thank you, Malcolm. Anything else?
Question for Chris: where do we get the 5 wins to get bowl eligible?
That's a good question.
Well, Duke has to be one of them, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you would think, because we do need 5 more.
Correct. 7 is the minimum to get to a bowl.
Right, because we play 2 FCS teams this year, and
right.
and this is where
Yikes.
and this is where canceling the ECU series could come back. I know fans loved it at the time and everything like that, but if you could go get a win against ECU this year, then you only have to win 6 games to qualify for a bowl instead of 7. Now, to be fair, you see a few 5-7 teams go to bowl games each year because they're just not enough teams qualify. So maybe as a 6-6 team, Tech could slide into one of those spots this year, even if they aren't technically eligible. But still, theoretically, you need to win 7 this year.
So let's actually.
So you can't count.
Do we want to go through the schedule right now?
Okay, and you can't. Rhode Island doesn't count.
Go ahead and pull it. It's easier to come up with the losses. Notre Dame would be 2 losses.
Yeah.
I think Miami's going to be a 3rd loss because that defense is stout and that's a tough place to play.
I agree with that.
So you're up to 3 losses.
And remember, Rhode Island doesn't count. We've already got our 1 win,
counting towards the 7.
So correct. So. We've already got our 1 FCS win counting towards the 7.
Yeah.
So we can't count Rhode Island in the wins total at all. So Duke, and then
you want me to give the games that you're picking from: Duke, Rhode Island, but we're assuming that's good, right?
Yeah, it doesn't count. Yeah.
North Carolina, Notre
Mm.
Dame, undefeated Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, who just lost to the Citadel.
The Citadel.
Georgia Tech is a must-win.
Yes. You have to go down there and beat Georgia Tech.
Pittsburgh and Virginia.
Now Pittsburgh is I haven't paid a lot of attention to them, but I did notice in looking at the stats that they're not running the ball.
No, they can't run the ball this year.
They can't run the ball. They haven't scored a touchdown in any quarter but the second quarter so far.
They're a poor offensive team.
Right.
Really poor.
And that game is
here, and it's Bud Foster's last game.
All right, so Georgia Tech is a must-win to get you to
Senior day.
3. Rhode Island will get you to 4. I know it doesn't count.
So you're basically trying to find 3 wins between Wake Forest, North Carolina, Virginia, and Pittsburgh.
And Duke.
And Duke. So you got to win 3 of those 5 is what it boils down to, is what you're saying.
Did you think you'd be sitting here at this point in the season with the schedule as weak as it is? Now, granted, some teams have been better than I thought. UVA's looked better than I thought. Carolina.
Yep.
I
think Wake Forest is the underrated team in the ACC.
Yeah, see, they lost. I think they lost a long-time starter at quarterback, and I'm not sure.
They're just running read option like crazy with this new guy.
Man, and the pace they run on offense, and that guy Carney they've got it.
Yeah, they're a really well coached team. I haven't looked at their depth chart, but they seem they're probably a pretty experienced team on the lines and everything like that. And Clawson gets the most he can get out of his talent. Yeah. It seems like.
Yeah, they're towards the end of Jim Grobe's career. Grobe, right? Grobe's career. They were really tailing off, and I'm not seeing that with Clawson.
Not so far.
Yeah.
I do think when that game's in November, right? Yeah. I think Tech has more room for growth than Wake Forest.
Probably
between now and then, for sure.
So that's the thing that's got to happen.
I think they've got more room for growth between now and then than Pitt.
Probably
I don't know about Georgia Tech. I just think Georgia Tech's going to be bad. Yeah. So bad. I don't know that Georgia Tech's going to win an ACC game this year. I haven't looked at their schedule.
Right.
But just losing to the Citadel, and honestly, it didn't surprise me.
Well, it's a huge rebuild.
Well, it's a huge rebuild. I mean,
you're running a triple option based team into a spread team.
Yeah, to do that in a year is impossible.
I was surprised they beat USF. That's the score that surprised me. The Citadel score didn't surprise me.
All right, so you quickly you look at Wake Forest, their schedule. I was reading before the season started. Somebody in North Carolina, was a pretty reliable football credible source, had Wake Forest being undefeated coming into Blacksburg, which you look at their schedule of Elon, Boston College, Louisville, Florida State's the FE1 in North Carolina State. That's who they have in front of them. And the way they're playing.
Goodness, really? No, see, they'll drop one of those, or maybe 2.
But still, they're going to have a good record.
They're going to have a good record coming in here. NC State?
I think NC State could.
Did you see what NC State did last weekend?
I did not, actually.
They got smacked by West Virginia, who had just gotten smacked by Missouri, who lost to Wyoming. And I know the transitive property and everything.
I'm going to start calling the transitive property of football with a W at the end.
So I'm just, they've got Florida State at home, they've got NC State at home, and they've got Louisville at home. They do go to Chestnut Hill. So I don't know if I'm buying into that, but I'm just basically saying that Wake Forest, I think, is that team in the ACC that will catch people.
I think there's a number of ACC teams that are pretty much the same. They all have certain strengths and they all have certain weaknesses, and some have peaked already. Maybe some will peak later. But I just for most of the conference, I just don't see a whole lot of difference between teams.
So real quick, to answer the question officially, what games do you see Virginia Tech getting to get to 7 wins? Yes.
They'll beat Georgia Tech.
Right.
Should.
So Duke, that'll get you to 4 wins. Rhode Island gets you to 5.
I got to study Duke. What they've done with their quarterback this year is impressive.
Now the question is, which games do they have to win to get to 7?
Oh yes,
right.
You can answer without knowing.
Absolutely, they
Duke,
have to.
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech, that would be 2. So that gets you to
Pittsburgh.
4.
Pitt might be on that list.
Pitt's probably on that list. That would be 5.
Rhode Island 6.
Honestly, those home games. Well, Rhode Island doesn't count.
Are they
right?
going?
No, yes, they do. They count to 7.
I'm saying to get to 7. We're including Rhode Island.
I got you.
So they basically have to win all their home games, right?
Yes.
And of course, North Carolina's
Georgia Tech on the road.
Right.
And UNC is obviously one of those teams that nobody really saw being as good as they've been.
And is that going to last?
Right. They just lost to Wake Forest.
The more film, it was a tale of 2 halves. They were awful in the first half and played better than Wake in the second.
Similar to South Carolina game, they were down.
I think the more film gets out on the freshman quarterback, the easier they'll be to defend. I think.
Yeah.
I think that's fairly typical. I don't know what their upcoming schedule looks like, but I'm not saying Carolina can't come into Tech and beat Lane Stadium. Obviously, they can. If Furman almost can, but I don't. I would pick Tech to win that game, in my opinion. I know Tech hasn't looked great, but I mean, for knowing how I know Fuente feels about North Carolina, he probably spent half the offseason game planning for them.
Right.
So
again, just to recap, we've got Rhode Island, Duke, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and that is
the home
6.
games plus Georgia Tech,
and then North Carolina is what. So that's the magic number to 7.
I don't want to have to go to Charlottesville needing to win the 7th game.
No, so that's very unlikely. UVA was better than Tech last year, and Tech still won. Generally, you don't go 2 years in a row beating a team that's better than you.
And it's and it's not just that, but it's the ways that UVA has found to lose to Tech. So one of the things I've been telling people, and I can't remember if I said this on the podcast or not, is when UVA finally beats Tech, I'll bet you it'll be by 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Right.
It won't be close.
Well, you remember like the 2003 game when Tech had beaten them 4 years in a row, which was back then was a lot for one team to win consecutively in that rivalry, and then UVA won 35-21 in 2003.
Yeah, and it was one of those. It didn't feel like it was that close.
Well, and Tech was winning that game actually at halftime, believe it or not.
Well, that was the one that Eric Green blocked a punt
lined up offsides.
That Tech, I think, ran back for a touchdown, and
sure did.
Green was called up for line offsides.
It was 21-21 at the time. Blocked the punt, ran it back for a touchdown, but it was offsides. So instead of being 28-21, Tech, UVA went on to win 35-21.
Right. Yeah, it all turned after that.
Yep.
One thing I'll say about UVA, I was doing just a little bit of homework looking at this. They play Old Dominion this week. They're ranked 21st. If Notre Dame beats Georgia, Notre Dame's probably going to be in the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
Virginia's going to probably be in the top 17. And there's a chance that's going to be College Game Day in South Bend, potentially back-to-back. There's a chance that UVA Notre Dame could be the 8 o'clock kick in 2 weeks.
If
that happens.
It bothers me that UVA just gets to go to South Bend in September. For the second time in a row, Virginia Tech's trip there is
going
in
November. So let me throw in a promo. We are doing we're doing a tailgate with a group called Tailgate the Bend. So tailgatethebend.com. The Bend as in South Bend. And for $95, I believe, is the fee. You get unlimited food, unlimited beer, cash liquor bar, live music. So look that up. Go to I'm trying to think. So do this on your computer. Google Tailgate the Bend Tech Sideline, and then you'll find a link, and you can read all about it. And come up there and tailgate with us, man. We'll be there. That is a it's pricey, but yeah, it's going to be some great food, good beer. You know,
good times.
Good times.
All right, so I know we're running a little bit short on time, but one thing I wanted to get to, and I'll kind of leave it as a tease, Will. I know when you get your Monday Thoughts article that's getting ready to come out, and you will be talking a little bit about how the last 2 games, while they have been wins for Virginia Tech, how those 2 games have gone, if it has affected the culture, perception of Virginia Tech football. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
The involvement of the fan base. It's hard to sort out the lunatic fringe from the rest. Like everybody, I talk to people, but I can't talk to all of them. I just know that at halftime when it was 14-3, a lot of people left. And I'm not just talking about the students. That gets talked about, how the north end zone emptied out. A lot of other people left too. And we talked about the energy level in the stadium. I don't really want to make sweeping statements yet. Attendance was listed at 52,000 the other day. That is not rock bottom since the sellouts ended in 2012.
Pitt game in 2015.
The Pitt game in 2015.
When it was so rainy.
2014 or 2015.
2015.
I think that attendance was actually in the high 40s.
Yeah. And honestly, it was like 30,000 probably.
Yeah. It was.
It was bad.
It's a dicey time because they're going to do a stadium reseeding next year, and I don't want to make sweeping statements, but a lot of the fan base is starting to tune out and just kind of push back from the table. And there are elements of the fan base that have decided Fuente's not the guy. And are those just loudmouths on Twitter and Facebook, or are those people that, in air quotes, matter? I don't know at this point. And when we start talking like this, we get criticized for it. Fuente's great. He's the guy. You need to stop being so negative. This is what the fans are talking about. This is why I'm talking about it, because the fans are talking about it. If the fans weren't talking about it, I wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's the elephant in the room. It's starting to happen. Portions of the fan base are turning on Fuente. And I'll put this in my article today. Virginia Tech is minus 40 against the spread this year in 3 games. They were favored by 4.5 at BC and lost by 7. They were favored by 28 over ODU and won by 14. They were favored by 21.5 over Furman and won by 7. Bettors haven't gotten smart yet. Vegas hasn't gotten smart yet. But it feeds into perception, and perception feeds into engagement, and engagement feeds into money and ticket sales. It's that simple, and the perception and the engagement are starting to decline. So I'm not a guy to say he's got to turn it around right now. No.
Yeah, I'm not. You're not going to say that because he's not going to get fired at the end of this year unless somebody magically donates $15 million to Virginia Tech. And even then, Witt would have to want to fire him, right?
Right, and the buyout can be spread out.
It can be. It can be, but that's still, that's not a.
And
you don't want to be paying for 2 football staffs at the same time. If you're the financial place Virginia Tech is,
right? Yeah. So I wrote an article, and it was criticized in July, and this was my article in July, that the next 18 months are critical for Justin Fuente, and those 18 months include, the 2020 recruiting class is not getting people excited, so that's off the table. The 18 months includes 2 full football seasons and a 2021 recruiting class. Right. And the first of those 3 elements, the 2019 football season, that's not going well.
It's not going well. And the second element, the 2020 recruiting class, probably isn't going to go well.
That's actually not part of my thinking. I'm writing that off. It's the 2021 recruiting class I'm talking about.
I was thinking 4 elements. This season, the 2020 recruiting class, next season, and then the 2021.
Now, the story of the 2020 recruiting class is already told.
Yeah.
There's no 4-stars out there. Again, I don't.
Well, the thing is, you don't know who the defensive coordinator is going to be,
and who he's going to bring, and
who he can possibly bring with him.
Yeah.
You also don't know if Fuente will make any offensive coaching staff changes. Frank Beamer's loyalty is one of the reasons Virginia Tech was so successful over the years, but it was also one of the things that when we reached our peak as a program, and the only way we could possibly get better is by bringing in new offensive coaches, but he didn't do it. That held the program back. If Fuente gets to the end of this season and decides, I might need to make a couple of changes on the offensive side of the ball, will he do it? Is he as loyal as Frank? I don't know. And I'm not saying that they should make changes. I'm just saying
these are discussions that are occurring. We're talking about it because other people are talking about it.
Correct. Right. And if he wants to, does he feel like he can? Does he want to turn over staff on both sides of the ball in the same offseason? It's horrible timing.
So then what happens is you're 4 years in and you just rolled over 70% of your coaching staff.
Right.
It's like pushing a reset button.
Right. It's absolutely. But that might be, if you're going to do that, do it this year when it's a small recruiting class. And if anything, you're not going to lose anybody greatly important, most likely. And maybe even you bring in somebody that you wouldn't have been able to get otherwise.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a long way between now and the end of the season.
Right. We'll tease that for the art, and we do have a podcast on Wednesday, which we'll talk about some more things with it being a bye week. But
yeah, we don't have a game coming up, so we'll talk about. We probably should have talked about the whole student North End Zone thing on Wednesday instead of today.
I enjoy when we have a chance. It was worth bringing up. So we have gone over an hour, so it has been a very successful.
And we said we were going to do 2 podcasts a week at 30 to 45 minutes, and here we go doing an hour long.
It's on me. I need to, But great talk. First of all, thanks everybody on Facebook for dropping some fantastic questions. As I always do to close podcasts, Chris, what's happening on TSL this week?
Oh, we will.
I can't wait to see the inside of the numbers this week.
Yeah, no kidding. I can't wait to write it. That'll be out. Do I normally do that? I do normally do that on Tuesdays. So that'll be on Tuesday.
I want to see Crawford's numbers, Connor's numbers. You've already teased.
Crawford didn't grade out as high as you would think.
But you've already teased Janzy's numbers. They weren't good.
They were awful. So we'll have that. True Freshman Report as always. Friday Q&A. I don't know what we're going to do on Wednesday in place of a game preview. I haven't had a chance.
I'm going to work on the podcast set some this week, I think.
Yeah. Nice.
Right.
Awesome. Well, cool.
The operation.
And maybe we'll do a movie review on Wednesday. I kind of enjoyed that. We did an It 2 review last week.
Malcolm saw It 2 last night.
I almost went to go see it last night. So All right, well, listen, that's going to do it for this week's, this Monday's edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Of course, we'll be back recording on Wednesday, probably around 9:30 in the morning again when we start recording this week. Hope you can join us on Facebook Live. If not, it's archived on Facebook, YouTube, many places, and, of course, wherever you get your podcasts, we've got you for the audio. We will be talking about Virginia Tech's upcoming bye week, and we haven't really gotten too far yet. But we'll talk about the bye week, but we'll have some fun podcasts on Wednesday. Hope you can join us. Of course, follow us on social media. We're on at Tech Sideline on both Facebook and Twitter. That'll do it for this week's podcast. For our producer behind the set, he is Malcolm. Yes, he's related to Stewart. Our founder and head honcho, Will Stewart. Our managing editor, Chris Coleman. My name is Evan Hughes, saying so long. Hope you can join us Wednesday. This has been the Tech Sideline podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm.